In just the last 5 years or so, the gig economy has taken over the world, particularly in the food delivery and taxi industries. In the blink of an eye, many job positions went from involving a direct relationship with a specific employer to being handled by intermediary apps, run by companies that insist that they don't actually employ people, but rather just provide a service by linking businesses and customers to the supposedly self-employed freelancers who use their apps. Workers who, according to these companies, should definitely not be legally considered their employees. This has had consequences, to say the least. These kinds of jobs already weren't always very secure, but they still, at least in countries with decent labor laws and enforcement, tended to be somewhat reliable sources of income and provide workers with protections in the event of an accident. But with the gig economy, everyone's on their own and only gets paid per gig, with the intermediary taking a hefty cut out of the value of the work they do, often resulting in them taking home even less than a legal minimum wage. And it's not even good for the businesses on the other end of the deal either. Many restaurants that use these services barely even make a profit from the delivery orders they get from apps, which is especially an issue since restaurants, especially independent ones, don't exactly tend to make huge profits in the first place. On the so-called ride-sharing side of the gig economy, things are at least pretty convenient for the consumer, since it is very useful to be able to call a car directly to your location through an app, and depending on the market, they can even be cheaper than it would be to hail a taxi. That's not exactly a good thing for the driver though. But on the food delivery side, it's much harder to find the positives. Even for the customer, everything in these apps tends to be more expensive than it would have been simply ordering directly from the restaurant, from the price of the food down to the delivery fee. You end up paying a massive premium that wouldn't have been there with a regular old phone delivery order. Remember those? Yet in a perfect demonstration of capitalist meritocracy, they've still pretty much monopolized food delivery all the same in an incredibly short time frame. If you run a restaurant and you want a piece of the delivery pie, you've got to use Uber Eats or DoorDash, or the dozens of other clones around the world, because that's what the customers are using. People open their app, mindlessly scroll through the options, choose something from a restaurant whose name they might even just forget the next day, and get it delivered to their door by a self-employed worker they'll probably never see again, with no one involved even deriving much benefit from this arrangement at all, aside from an teensy little bit of convenience on the customer's end. That's just how things are now. I used to work for one of these delivery apps myself back in 2016 and 2017. I had to quit my previous job because I was moving away for university. I had about 2 months worth of savings to live off, which was enough to pay for the basics like rent, food and bills, and I was sure that I'd be able to find a job within that time frame, especially since I was willing to accept literally anything. I was extremely wrong. Every single position that I applied for, from cashier to dishwasher to cleaning toilets, had hundreds upon hundreds of other applicants. This was in Melbourne, Australia, and at the time, pretty much everyone who I knew was having the exact same problem. The epitome of this ridiculousness was an interview for a shelf packer role at a major supermarket chain. I made it to the third stage of interviews. Yes, there were apparently 3 stages, and this was like a whole day event in a massive conference center. There was more than 100, maybe more than 200 other applicants there, and they divided everyone into little groups where they did team building exercises, like something out of a primary school classroom or something, while a recruiter watched us in order to judge whether we were suitable for the role of packing shelves or being a cashier, I guess. Minimum wage shelf stacking job, 200 interviewees in an auditorium. Just imagine that, think about that. Needless to say, I apparently failed to distinguish myself from the 200 other applicants and didn't end up getting the job. It actually got to the point where I'd used up all my savings. I paid my rent, stocked up on the absolute cheapest food possible, and then just plain had no money left over for the rest of the month. Literally not even $1. Now, when you're in that situation where you failed to find a job for months and you're getting really desperate, the gig economy can really seem like a lifeline. And it definitely did for me. I had a bike, a phone, and an ID, and apparently that was literally all you needed to be accepted. They took anyone who just showed up with those things. Sure sounded better than being evicted in a month. Now there's a whole point to be made here regarding what I said in the intro. These gig economy apps rely on having a steady stream of people who are so desperate for work that they'll just take anything, even if it pays less than minimum wage and offers them no benefits or protections whatsoever. They don't create new jobs at all, they just offload them to a third party in a way that's worse for everyone involved and especially for the worker. So the fact that I was unable to find other work and ended up resorting to the gig economy in order to avoid literal homelessness was actually a direct consequence of their very existence. If the gig economy wasn't a thing, then every restaurant that used their service would instead have to hire a delivery guy, meaning that there would have been many more real job openings available for people like me, and they also would have paid better and more securely, and the business would have been liable to actually help me out in the event of an accident. That's going to be very relevant soon. So anyway, off I went signing up for Uber Eats. I uploaded a picture of my ID, gave them my personal details, you know, all that sort of stuff. And after that, all that there was left to do was to head down to their office in person so that they could confirm my ID was real and also sell me the insulated food backpack that I needed to work for them. Yep, I had to buy from this company the gear that was needed to work for them. So I arrived at the address that they gave me, and it was like an abandoned looking warehouse in a side street. It was very clear that they were basically just renting the cheapest spaces they could find for commercial purposes. Like, there was a tiny desk in the corner with 2 people there, and the rest of it was just an empty warehouse. It took like a few minutes, and then yay, I had a job. Sorry, I didn't actually have a job. I was rather a freelance partner. So naturally, as you do when you're someone who desperately needs money, I started working right away. It was actually really hard. I was on a bike rather than like a motorcycle, so it was actually very physical. I'd quite often get deliveries that would take me like 3 or 4 kilometers away, which would pay like 10 to 12 Australian dollars each, which I think is like 6 or 7 US dollars. Now, any decent cyclist knows that 3 kilometers on its own really isn't much. Counting the time that it takes you to enter the restaurant, pick up the food, get back on your bike, you know, ride in traffic, etc. That's probably like 15 to 20 minutes maximum. The problem is that once you're done with the delivery, you're going to end up in a residential area. You're going to need to cycle back to where there's actually restaurants and wait for a new delivery. You're not paid for that part, you're only paid for the delivery. So it's actually like 6 kilometers and 40 minutes of your time. Even if you were concentrating and doing things as best as you possibly can, you would make like 15 Australian dollars an hour, which is significantly less than the minimum wage of $19 an hour. That might still sound like a lot, but trust me, in Australia the cost of living is extremely high, it really isn't. And you know, when you're actually earning minimum wage in a more official job, you don't have to buy, use and pay to maintain your own equipment. I'm sure with a motorcycle or car it would have been much faster, but then you're also paying for gas and more maintenance, so you probably wouldn't really end up making that much more, if at all. So all in all, it was a really bad deal for me, but I had no other options, and that's how they get you. I worked from 11 AM to 10 PM, which was basically the entire time frame in which you could actually get deliveries every single day for like 3 weeks straight. I was making anywhere from like 50 to 150 Australian dollars per day. It varied a whole lot based on the volume of deliveries that you got. So I was working 11-hour days for what, even on the best days, was still less than minimum wage, which would have been $209 for an 11-hour workday. Actually, no, it would have been more because of overtime. It sucked ass. I was riding my bike for like 40 kilometers every single day and basically dying. Don't get me wrong though, if I had been working for an employer, you know, with like a fixed wage, who at least had some degree of responsibility for me, it would have been okay. Tolerable at least. But as it was, it sucked. I still had to live off the absolute cheapest food imaginable, though funnily enough, I was now burning so many calories cycling every single day that I had to start buying like double the amount of food that I did before. So that was actually another additional cost on top of everything else. But thankfully, I did at least manage to put aside enough to pay my rent after like 3 weeks of doing that. So I guess there's that. Then one day, I was in the middle of working, as I had been for basically every waking hour of the last like month or so. I went off on a delivery and suddenly it just starts pouring rain, despite the fact that it was in the middle of summer, because you know, that's just how Melbourne is. Usually I would have been cautious and stopped and just let it subside, but I was in the middle of a delivery, so I didn't have that luxury. You have to deliver the food within a set time frame, otherwise you get reprimanded and you might potentially lose your job, and then whoops, you're homeless. So I keep riding, and then I don't really know exactly what happened. I felt a bump in my rear tire, and the next thing I know, I was on the ground and my mouth hurt like hell. I put my hand up against it, pulled it away, took a look at it, and well, it was covered in blood and had 2 fragments of my teeth in it. Then I looked around and I saw some lady in a Land Rover stop beside me, looking down upon me with a guilty looking face. I tried to flag her down for help, but she drove off immediately. I'm pretty sure that she hit me, but I don't know for sure because no one else was around to confirm it. Thankfully though, like 30 seconds later, I did manage to get some help. Our family in a car stopped and helped me out, and some of the people who live nearby came out of their house and let me lie down on their porch while they called the ambulance and stuff, which was really nice of them. They helped me to gather my things too, which were strewn out all over the road. Somehow my phone didn't break, which was cool, and my bike was fine too, which was also cool. And I gotta tell you that I am 99% sure that I probably would have died or at least been seriously injured if I wasn't wearing a helmet. So yeah, if you cycle, I suggest that you wear one. But in those moments with my teeth literally in my hand, with my upper lip split open, bleeding everywhere, while I was in intense pain, I wasn't thinking about like my injuries. I wasn't thinking about my immediate circumstances. I was thinking, oh man, oh crap, I'm gonna miss this delivery, and then I'm gonna get fired, and then I'm not gonna be able to pay my rent, and I'm gonna be homeless, and I'm not gonna be able to eat, and I'm gonna starve to death. Oh my god! I was in such a precarious situation overall that my immediate circumstances, where I had just sustained like a gory ass injury, really barely even registered for me. In this delirium, I even asked the people who were helping me if they could please deliver this delivery for me and finish it so that I didn't get fired. I was the wage cuck supreme in that moment. It got worse when the ambulance arrived. I refused to get in until the paramedics assured me that it would be free, because luckily I apparently qualified for a low income fee waiver. So I hopped into the ambulance and they managed to bandage me up a little bit and stop most of the bleeding. After that I took a selfie and I'm about to show it. So if you don't want to see someone with broken teeth and a split lip, I suggest that you look away for about 5 seconds now. So yeah, there it is. Pretty bad. In the ambulance, literally on the way to the hospital, I was still primarily worried about my job. The first person who I called was a friend who I asked to please go to the crash site and retrieve my backpack and deliver the food so that I don't get fired. Needless to say, he politely refused. So then I immediately shot an email off to Uber Eats support explaining that, please sir, Mr. Uber, please don't fire me. It's not my fault, I had an accident. Please sir, allow me the privilege of working for you still. Please, I don't want to be homeless. I have the receipts right here. I had an accident on delivery today. I'm currently in the hospital. While in the ambulance, I got a bunch of delivery requests that I had to decline before I was able to go offline. Could I please be forgiven for these, as my percentage of acceptance is now below 85%. 85% acceptance was the threshold where you would get banned from the app, I believe. And guess what? Uber never responded to that email. Or at least I never received it. Then the cherry on top of it all. Apparently the customer had complained that their delivery was late, so Uber called me to ask, what was going on. I said to the support person that I was currently literally in the ambulance, that I had an accident, and I asked if there was anything that they could do to help me. And they hung up immediately, literally right as I finished that last sentence. And honestly, I wouldn't have expected anything less from these companies. They specifically want expendable workers who they don't have to take any responsibility for. So anyway, I was dropped off in the ER of a hospital where luckily there was an attending doctor who had emergency dental training. She stitched up my lip and applied like dental film to the broken teeth to make sure that the nerve wasn't exposed. Luckily for me, that part was all covered by Australia's public health insurance, or I would have been fucked. I went home after about 2 or 3 hours there, and then the next morning I immediately put myself to trying to figure out how to get my teeth fixed and how to get my lip fixed up a bit better. Like in most countries that I know of, dental care in Australia is unfortunately not covered by public health insurance. But nonetheless, I showed up to the emergency room of a public dental hospital and I found that hip hip hooray, because I'm so poor, I qualified for a huge subsidy. I only had to pay about $25 per visit. That was pretty cool because otherwise I would have been totally fucked. But still, the government ended up paying for my medical treatment when normally it would have been the employer's insurance that had to. So taxpayer dollars ended up subsidizing these companies' awful business practices. But hey, that's the gig economy for ya. It's all well and good not having any cover from your employer until the day that you actually need it. Regardless of that huge problem though, after the accident, I still had to keep working. I needed the money even more than I did before because now I had to pay like $25 per dentist visit and I was going to the dentist like 2 to 3 times per month. So that was an extra expense of like $50 to $100 per month I didn't have to pay before. So even after this trauma on the job, Uber Eats still had me by the balls, just totally. And literally 2 days later, I was already back on my bike and working for them. This wasn't exactly a political awakening moment for me or anything though. I knew all of this about these gig economy apps before I even went in. But even with all that knowledge, it's still not like I could have said no. It was that or not pay my rent and not eat food. Or like I guess I could have kept hoping that I get chosen from the hundreds upon hundreds of applicants for every single job opening, which didn't seem very likely to be honest. My reaction here, where I was more worried about my ability to pay to fulfill my basic needs than an immediate medical trauma, seems pretty ridiculous on the surface, right? I even personally can't really talk about it without making it like a joke, because to me it seems like I was overreacting. But really, I think my reaction was actually 100% rational. Everything about it makes sense. Your ability to pay for food, rent, and other such necessities is directly related to your physical health, just as much as being able to get treatment for a medical emergency is. If Uber had actually banned me from that platform as a result of that accident, I would have been in much deeper trouble than just missing half of my 2 front teeth and having a split upper lip. I would have been homeless and starving within weeks, and who knows where else that would have led afterwards. That the best possible outcome available to me here was simply that I still had the privilege to go back and immediately start working again for the very company that I had just injured myself working for, who had treated me like I was nothing in the wake of a potentially fatal accident. Really shows just how messed up and coercive every single thing about the gig economy is. Yes, somehow even significantly more so than a regular job. If I had been a direct restaurant employee working those same hours, their insurance would have covered my treatment. I would have gotten paid time off in order to recover. I would have been getting paid at least the minimum wage and overtime. Instead, well, all that stuff happened. Workers around the world struggled and died for things like minimum wages, and bosses actually being held accountable when workers are injured. And the so-called gig economy is pretty much just one gigantic loophole designed to get around every single labor law ever. That's why these companies are happy to take huge losses every single year. They're playing the long game, trying to alter the already fundamentally exploitative relationship between worker and employer into one that's somehow even worse. Now look, I'm totally fine now. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I don't need anyone to give me their sympathy or their empathy. That's not why I'm making this video. Things luckily turned out okay in the end. I worked a few more months for Uber Eats, then I got lucky and found something else. My teeth are pretty okay now, I think. It's, which one is it? This one? And this one. This one has broken a few times and I had to get it replaced, but the one in the middle has actually lasted for 4 years without a replacement, which is crazy to me because it was done by dental students. Yeah, something that I forgot to mention is those subsidized dentist visits are only subsidized because they use you as a guinea pig for the students. They did great work though, I have no complaints. So anyway, then a couple of years after that, I somehow ended up becoming a full-time YouTuber who makes videos in their underwear. Interesting journey. Anyway, so the gig economy sucks, capitalism sucks, everything sucks. This video has already gone on too long. I think I made the point like 5 minutes ago, so it's time to end it. So yeah, see you next time folks. Bye! Thanks for watching this video. I unfortunately didn't have much time to get another well-researched video out this month, so I just decided to make something based more on personal experience for once. We'll be right back to our regularly scheduled programming next month. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, and maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, sending me a one-time tip on Ko-fi, or becoming a member on YouTube. I make videos full-time, so it all really helps. Thanks a lot. Now I'd just like to thank all of my patrons, and especially my $25 plus patrons: Shab, Evan Carroll, Jesse Hosick, Brosnan, Dusty, Mischief and Fins, Jel Cribson, A Big Mean Cat, Darcius B, Benny G, Pote, and my $10 plus patrons: Michael Strauss, Cincione Bresgal, Jacob Pitts, Insurgente, Cab the Burdened One, Artemio Nelson, Crouton Baguette, One Trash Boy, Mamushin, Morimer, Eleanor Taylor, Nico Del Sesto, Young Trotsky, Roja, Industrial Robot, Jesse Zaleski, JG, Christopher Strom, Jackie T, Gilles Alcoin, and Mira Kisses. That's all, see you next time.